So, lots been done since I've last done something video-wise. So, this here is the rear heater block, or I'm sorry, heater core for usually for the passengers on this bus. We don't need it, at least not for what we plan on doing. So, it's kind of in the way. We've got a floor to rip up. Basically, looks like just some really uber thick heater hose and whatever wires for the system to turn it on and off. What we're gonna do is hack it off and splice it together at the very front. Luckily, as I was moving along here, they already had a splice here. I'm guessing for some other unit that no longer exists. So we're going to just reuse this entire part up near the front. So with the floor, the seats are all out. We're going to be bringing them to a scrapyard. Seems like nobody really wants them. Understandable. I mean, there's very few uses for bus seats aside from, well, being bus seats. So we've got... My plan is to go down the center here and take out one half of this, kind of get it started, just get a feel for how it's going to peel up. So this is the start of me pulling up the floor. Basically, I just did a score mark to start and just peeled right up. It was actually very easy. We've heard different ideas on it being really tough to loose and chunky in pieces, but ours came off in one giant sheet, no problem. The first thing we noticed was it was super wet. There was water beating up from the wood and just chunks and pieces coming off, and we were just it was over the top how bad it was. So we can only imagine what was underneath. So I start working on the back. It was just one giant panel on the back going all the way across. So just to get a C for what we're gonna have to deal with, I start prying that up. A lot of the nail heads mainly stayed with the metal flooring, so we had to start taking that stuff out as well. So we got the first panel off, and as you can tell, a lot of rust. Anywhere there wasn't rust, like on the clean metal, you could see it just beat it up. So from this point on, we start to work on the rest of the panels going all the way across the floor. And it was basically what you just saw before with the crowbar to start, and working your way up to the back of the driver's seat. And it was patchy all over the place. A lot of the water came through right where the seams are between the aisle and the seats. So the cleaning of the floor, we took all of the debris out. We ended up grabbing a metal scraper, and we took a bulk of the leftover pieces of wood, the giant rust flakes and stuff, and then we took a wire brush hooked to an air compressor and went to town up and down the entire floor to pretty much loosen up what we could. After we got all that done, we washed the floor and degreased it. And after that, we then used rust converter across all the rest of the metal to basically stop and halt any more future rust from happening. And as you can see here, this hole that's on the floor, that's the top of the gas tank. There's some sensor there, I'm guessing, for the fuel gauge. And then over here we have the heating unit and the rest of the wiring system for the entire bus. And this was what was holding us back in taking out the last board. And there's this metal plate up here that I'm pointing at that goes to the transmission. As you can see, I'm scraping up all of that leftover rusted debris and pieces of wood. It was definitely a long process. Not as long as paint, but it was definitely long. And I believe we did a pretty decent job in making sure it won't ever rust again. The wheel wells were actually doing pretty well. There weren't any rust problems there at all. So the way they built these floors at the factory, I'm guessing, is they had 3 pieces of rubber. They had an aisle in the center, and then they had 2 long strips going along where the seats would go. They also had 2 caps that went over top of the wheel wells. And they have this little metal track that would go down the aisles on either side to kind of protect the seam, but it didn't do a really good job. So this is Zach. He's taking a look at our electrical for the bus. He actually does a really good job in taking out a lot of the unused pieces of wire and really makes it nice and clean. So right now we're trying to assess to pull out the unit so we can start working on getting this last board up and off the floor. As you can tell, it's right up against the edge of the wall. It was very interesting trying to pull this out. And now comes the fun part of me trying to shorten the coolant line for getting this back in place.
Zach was an asshole. So this is the kind of mess you're going to run into when it comes to recutting the line for your heat and trying to apply it directly to the actual unit versus having a long string of hose. So here I am, pretty much keeping it at level. Any attempt that I make to apply it will spill out its contents. So we're trying to find that magic length of hose to allow us to install this back in without kinks or whatnot.